Yes, your use of the word guardianship or stewardship, very important there, I think, because I think you and I as individuals may wish to be true to that concept, but it's extremely difficult to be able to do that, to take the actions necessary to be consistent with those aims. You need to work with a network of others who you trust to be able to do that. And so that trust relationship with the people that you buy from and trade with is what I think businesses are trying to say to their customers. You can trust us to do that. And let me just give you a tangible example, because we're speaking together with the wonders of technology. Me in Brussels, you in New Delhi, and
I'm in Mumbai, but close enough.
But my apologies, I completely missed that. Mumbai to Brussels, and via a whole load of technology along the way. But sitting in front of me is a device that's enabling that. And I know that embedded in that device are some critical raw materials, which have an economic value of about 3 euro cents, maybe 4 euro cents. And they have been mined from the earth and refined, and very, very small quantities of them used to alloy into this piece of equipment to make it functional. And when this machine has come to the end of its days, it will be smashed up, and material recycling will be the way for it to go. And those critical raw materials, tiny quantities, will get lost in the ferrous and non-ferrous streams. And that they'll get used in rebar, in concrete, perhaps the next car that you buy. But what has happened is that those critical raw materials that once were in the Earth's crust will have been distributed even further in those two streams, ferrous, non-ferrous, will be completely inaccessible to our children, our children's children. But we will have done that. We will have accelerated entropy for the use of our pieces of equipment for 4 or 5 years. And I think that's alarming, really, that we think ourselves that that's perfectly acceptable, that we just don't wish to be concerned with that accelerated entropy for materials that are very valuable into humanity, but don't have an economic value for this piece of equipment in front of me. Right. And we can't really intervene, can we, Rajiv? How are we going to change 3, 4 euro cents into enough that the materials will be recovered? I don't think so. Which is why I come back to saying you need to find a way of extending the life of the components and products for longer than a 5-year life cycle or 3-year life cycle. And the best work I've seen on that has been done by TU Delft. TU Delft and Dave Peck at TU Delft has been very impressive in the work they've done there. And also, I would also say, as I've criticized Apple in our conversation, Apple did some really good work on asking the same question, because they make 1 billion products a year. Yeah. And when it comes to stewardship, their tiny quantities of critical raw materials per product, when you multiply by 1 billion, is a lot of material. And they recognize that, and I think are struggling with what are they going to do about it to be sustainable as an organization in the future. Whereas you and I talk about it intellectually and as consumers, but we want people like Apple to think on our behalf, what are they going to do? And if they crack it, if they do something that's convincing, you and I are going to do business with them, aren't we? Right. We'll say, thank you, you're part of our trusted network to make us, to have those words that you use, stewardship, guardianship, mean something other than words on a page in a book or a conversation like this.
Yes. You're also making me think about this issue of closing the loop. So if we've done the work to mentally, emotionally, perhaps even spiritually orient ourselves towards this sense of stewardship and guardianship, and that we want to take full ownership and responsibility for all the gifts that really we have, what we, in a deadened way call natural resources, but it's all part of a living, breathing planet. It's going to require a rewiring or a re-engineering of the way our industrial economy fundamentally functions. And the gap is what we call perhaps the waste management industry, which really should be the resource stewardship, resource guardianship, resource recovery, harness, and reuse industry in a way. And so, and there are some loops that enable that in an organic fashion. But what I'm getting to is, I could be wrong, but maybe you could shed some light on this with some of the movement that's happening in Europe. Is my sense is that there's a huge disparity between the amount of research and work done to produce products versus the amount of research, technology, and effort put into the recovery of materials from products at the end of their lives, right? Using the example of very small amounts of what I'm guessing you meant are conflict minerals in electronic products, which in a maybe unsophisticated waste management or recovery system is almost impossible to economically or sensibly harness, to pull out from large quantities of ferrous or non-ferrous materials. So I just wonder, are you seeing more resources or a shift towards greater use of technology, greater investment in research to complete that loop so that it is just as sophisticated and just as or thinks of materials in just as valued a way as we do when we're extracting them from the earth? And there's so much precision about it in terms of quality and purity. Where do things stand from an infrastructure, if that's the right word or not, I'm not sure, but from that, the closing the loop, the reverse supply chain. And my sense is that more needs to be done there to really make it robust and to be able to recover materials as much as possible. But I wondered if you had any thoughts there.
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, when I started my career in this area of the circular economy, it was at that final stage where companies like Suez and Veolia scaled themselves up to become more skilled, able to put more money into the investments required to sort out the mess that's left at the end. Mm-hmm. But I've left that behind, in that I think that it's the priority is first to extend the life of products, to design products in such a way that there's a cascaded use for as long as possible, to bring them back and add value to them again. And I like the ideas of product value retention for as long as possible, and product life extension, those two terms. And obviously from remanufacturing point of view. Yeah. But of course, inevitably, we do end up with a whole lot of junk products that need to be managed. And that's then when the waste management industry has got its task. As a company here in Belgium called Umicore, who are about as good as it gets when it comes to finding, re-refining the metals that are left over from our lives. So I think there is a lot to be done there. You're quite right. There's still a lot to be done to make it as precise and as well engineered as our work at the start of the value added process for materials and products. So a lot to be done at that end still. But for me, priority one is still not to fool ourselves into thinking that a high recycling rate is something to celebrate, because we've been doing that for 25 years and the atmosphere doesn't seem to have noticed. The level of CO2 in the atmosphere has been going up steadily throughout my life. And regardless of what policies we've had for recycling, the recycling rate's gone up, but so has the CO2 in the atmosphere, because our product lives, I think, have become shorter, more complex products. And so we've just got a lot of activity going on, producing more and more products that are a shorter life, ending up with a heap of junk at the end. Yep. That's what we have to break, in my view. That's the principal change that we need. And that's why I think your questions are particularly interesting. There are all sorts of technical issues in there. How do you do it? What policies? But are we pushing at something that's at a human need, that humans will respond to if the right language could be used to say, this is what we're doing. This is, and so we're making the right appeal to the heart and the head. Yeah. And I think so far we haven't. That's why I'm enjoying this conversation, Rajiv. I think what you're bringing to it is there's something deeper and more spiritual about this work. It's not just a technical question about making things last longer. Hopefully there's a human need that we're responding to as well. But we're all struggling, aren't we? We haven't quite got the language right. We're not borrowing from the right thinkers. We know that there are there's the psychologists out there who the marketing people are always using. We know there are anthropologists who have done all this work in the past, whether it's Levi Strauss or I'll tell you what came to mind is in The Grapes of Wrath, there's a wonderful quote. John Steinbeck, he says, yes. How will we know it's us without our past? I think that's fantastic. How will we know it's us without our past? And you know, we've become this society where we just crush through consumer stuff. Rush. It's got to be new. Get through it. Chuck it away. Get another new thing. And thereby we're also just saying, forget where we've come from. And I think that's where we've got it as an essence of what you've been talking about today, that we could just dig a bit deeper and bring other thinkers to this conversation. And I think the language would change, and maybe we'd respond to that human need better in the way that the right to repair movement, I think, maybe accidentally put its finger and got it right.